Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. It is 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, or whatever time it happens to be where you are because you are watching us right now. It is Wednesday, and it's time for our Unlimited Wisdom special series, Outwitting the Devil with Dana Scranton. Now, Dana is a very knowledgeable person. And just to give you a little background on Dana, because that is very important, he has helped us with the Mastering of Science of Getting Rich series that we also have previously posted in our group. And it's an incredible discussion on mastering the science of getting rich. But this time we are doing Napoleon Hill's Outwitting the Devil. Dana has studied at the University of Wyoming, Northwest College, and Stanford University, and he works at making a difference of how to teach people how to create an entrepreneurial lifestyle of fun, profit, freedom, and impact. And this quote specifically from Dana, from his Facebook page, really says it all and is a great introduction for us on this particular series. My purpose in life is to help people create an authentic life of freedom of their choosing and on their terms. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dana Scranton.
All right, well, thank you, Craig. Man, I'll tell you what, that's just remarkable, Craig. You have such a knack. You ought to be in theater.
Funny you should, never mind.
Well, welcome everybody. And today is, the first day of actually going through the book. We did a little introduction in the last episode, but today we will be venturing into the book. And just to give you a little heads up, if you have the book, the one that's going to be shown on the screen, today's audio will take us halfway through it. The way the audio book is set up is they have split chapter 1 into 2 pieces. So today we'll cover that first half, and in the next episode we'll cover the second half. So it's not like you're missing anything if you're following along in the book and all of a sudden chapter 1 ends. So with that said, what I'd like to do is just go over a few points, a few questions, and then we'll jump right into the video. So let me pull up the share. Okay. Desktop. There it is, Keynote. Okay. So with any luck, there it is. Okay.
Yeah, I can see it.
I can see it. All right. Well, I'm going to call this one Chapter 1A so that we're congruent with the book. And then the next episode will be Chapter 1B so that we're all still in Chapter 1 of the book, since that's what you'll be referencing most of the time. So a reminder, this is a mastermind. And as we described last time, a mastermind, even though originally crafted by Napoleon Hill as a gathering of people around a table or in a room, or later on you'll learn in his mind, which is a very interesting concept, in a digital environment, it works the same. You know, it's all about being connected. And one of the things that connects us is a common purpose. And in this case, we're studying Outwitting the Devil so that we may strengthen our purpose and definiteness of thoughts and actions towards attainment of that purpose. Your purpose is your own. And so this is a framework, and we're all on the same page in that we want to strengthen our purpose, whatever that may be to you. So that hopefully is enough to keep us congruent and connected in the great big ether of the sky. Some questions to ponder before we get into this. And these are, you can write them down or just kind of noodle them or conceptualize them. And as we go through the book, it'll give you something to be thinking about, to follow on and have it say, there's the answer. So first of all, was Napoleon Hill guided from the onset of his journey, or did his journey attract guidance? So in other words, was there a force beyond him that guided him through this journey? Or did the way he approached life turn up attracting guidance? So were his business endeavors distractions or preparations? Can descending into the depths of desperation and despair reveal a wellspring of fortune? Okay, what is a cause of success? And what is a cause of failure? Again, these are things that you'll see and hear in the book. Okay. What is the other self that Hill encountered? Now, this one, it can be just a little ambiguous. As you read through the book, it seems like he's saying different things, but ultimately it's the same thing, so be aware of that. Now, what are two ways that instructions from that other self may be communicated to you? And Hill will reveal those. How does one find happiness? Is adversity a seed of opportunity, of purpose? And where does turning plans into reality begin? Next, what is faith? What is fear? And what are two means of keeping fear locked away? And finally, does any part of Hill's journey resonate with you? So as we go through this audio, and as you read the book, ask yourself, does anything that he's describing describe your life? So that's it. And then we'll come back at the end and we will hit this other slide. So that's it, Craig. We're ready to roll, Robert.
Okay.
Carnegie. For more than a quarter of a century, my major purpose has been that of isolating and organizing into a philosophy of achievement the causes of both failure and success, with the object of being helpful to others who have neither the inclination nor the opportunity to engage in this form of research. My labor began in 1908 as the result of an interview that I had with the late Andrew Carnegie. I frankly told Mr. Carnegie that I wished to enter law school, and that I had conceived the idea of paying my way through school by interviewing successful men and women, finding out how they came by their success, and writing stories of my discoveries for magazines. At the end of our first visit, Mr. Carnegie asked whether or not I possessed enough courage to carry out a suggestion he wished to offer me. I replied that courage was about all I did have, and that I was prepared to do my best to carry out any suggestion he cared to offer. He then said, "Your idea of writing stories about men and women who are successful is commendable, as far as it goes, and I have no intention of trying to discourage you from carrying out your purpose. But I must tell you that if you wish to be of enduring service, not only to those now living, but to posterity as well, you can do so if you will take the time to organize all of the causes of failure, as well as all of the causes of success. There are millions of people in the world who have not the slightest conception of the causes of success and failure. The schools and colleges teach practically everything except the principles of individual achievement. They require young men and women to spend from 4 to 8 years acquiring abstract knowledge, but do not teach them what to do with this knowledge after they get it. The world is in need of a practical, understandable philosophy of achievement, organized from the factual knowledge gained from the experience of men and women in the great university of life. In the entire field of philosophy, I find nothing which even remotely resembles the sort of philosophy which I have in mind. We have few philosophers who are capable of teaching men and women the art of living. It seems to me that here is an opportunity which should challenge an ambitious young man of your type. But ambition alone is not enough for this task which I have suggested. The one who undertakes it must have courage and tenacity. The job will require at least 20 years of continuous effort, during which the one who undertakes it will have to earn his living from some other source, because this sort of research is never profitable at the outset, and generally those who have contributed to civilization through work of this nature have had to wait 100 years or so after their own funerals to receive recognition for their labor.
20 years of labor with no pay and possibly no recognition? How would you respond to this offer? As he discusses later, Hill accepted Carnegie's challenge, and with a letter of introduction from Carnegie, set about interviewing the giants of that time, including Theodore Roosevelt, Thomas Edison, John D. Rockefeller, Henry Ford, Alexander Graham Bell, King Gillette, founder of the Gillette Safety Razor Company, and many others. His effort ultimately culminated in the publication of several books, including the 8-volume Law of Success and Think and Grow Rich, after more than 25 years of research. Think and Grow Rich is widely recognized as the seminal work in self-development, introducing essentially all the principles that continue to serve as the foundation for the teachings of the personal development gurus of today. As reflected in Hill's own description, the process of developing and publishing Think and Grow Rich was itself a study in the principles he revealed. It may be telling that the manuscript of Outwitting the Devil was written the year after Think and Grow Rich was published, since this work may reveal the frustration and revelation of Hill's other self, and how he conquered his frustrations and succeeded in using the very principles he described in Think and Grow Rich. Outwitting the Devil will reveal Hill's spiritual awakening and how each of us can learn from his encounter with the devil.
If you undertake this job, you should interview not only the few who have succeeded, but the many who have failed. You should carefully analyze many thousands of people who have been classified as failures, and I mean by the term failures, men and women who come to the closing chapter of life disappointed because they did not attain the goal which they had set their hearts upon achieving. As inconsistent as it may seem, you will learn more about how to succeed from the failures than you will from the so-called successes. They will teach you what not to do. Along toward the end of your labor, if you carry it through successfully, you will make a discovery which may be a great surprise to you. You will discover that the cause of success is not something separate and apart from the man, that it is a force so intangible in nature that the majority of men never recognize it, a force which might be properly called the other self. Noteworthy is the fact that this other self seldom exerts its influence or makes itself known, excepting at times of unusual emergency, when men are forced, through adversity and temporary defeat, to change their habits and to think their way out of difficulty. My experience has taught me that a man is never quite so near success as when that which he calls failure has overtaken him, for it is on occasions of this sort that he is forced to think. If he thinks accurately, and with persistence, he discovers that so-called failure usually is nothing more than a signal to rearm himself with a new plan or purpose. Most real failures are due to limitations which men set up in their own minds. If they had the courage to go one step further, they would discover their error.
Most real failures are due to limitations which men set up in their own minds. A negative mindset and self-doubt can be the primary obstacle to success. With the current economic downturn, far too many people who have all their life done everything right are now, for the first time, facing severe economic adversity. The greatest barrier to their recovery is their own fear and self-doubt instilled by their recent experience. Have you allowed the current economic downturn to overtake you? Have self-doubt and self-sabotage held you back from reaching your dreams? Are you your own worst enemy? In Think and Grow Rich, Hill told the story of R.U. Darby, a gold prospector. Frustrated when a rich vein of gold apparently ran out, Darby sold his gold claim for a pittance to the town junkman. The junkman brought in the right expert advisors and found that Darby would have rediscovered the vein had he moved his digging a mere 3 feet. Had Darby persevered, he would have made his fortune, but he gave up and abandoned his dreams when he was only 3 feet from gold. Rather than being crushed by his error, Darby learned from his experience and went on to build an insurance empire. Wow. Will you abandon your quest just before reaching great success, when you are only 3 feet from gold? You can listen to how many of today's icons persevered through difficult situations in the book 3 Feet from Gold.
Begin life anew. Mr. Carnegie's speech reshaped my entire life and planted in my mind a burning purpose which has driven me ceaselessly, and this despite the fact that I had but a vague idea as to what he meant by the term other self. During my labor of research into the causes of failure and success, I have had the privilege of analyzing more than 25,000 men and women who were rated as failures, and over 500 who were classed as successful. Many years ago, I caught my first glimpse of that other self Mr. Carnegie had mentioned. The discovery came, as he said it would, as the result of two major turning points of my life, which constituted emergencies that forced me to think my way out of difficulties such as I had never before experienced. I wish it were possible to describe this discovery without the use of the personal pronoun, but this is impossible because it came through personal experiences from which it cannot be separated. To give you the complete picture, I shall have to go back to the first of these two major turning points and bring you up to the discovery, step by step. The research necessary for the accumulation of the data, from which the 17 principles of achievement and the 30 major causes of failure were organized, required years of labor. I had reached the false conclusion that my task of organizing a complete philosophy of personal achievement had been completed. Far from having been completed, my work had merely begun. I had erected the skeleton of a philosophy by organizing the 17 principles of achievement and the 30 major causes of failure, but that skeleton had to be covered with the flesh of application and experience. Moreover, it had to be given a soul through which it might inspire men and women to meet obstacles without going down under them. The soul, which had yet to be added, as I discovered later, became available only after my other self made its appearance, through two major turning points of my life. Resolving to turn my attention, and whatever talents I might possess, into monetary returns through business and professional channels, I decided to go into the profession of advertising, and I became the advertising manager of the LaSalle Extension University of Chicago. Everything went along beautifully for 1 year, at the end of which I was seized by a violent dislike for my job and resigned. I then entered the chain store business with the former president of the LaSalle Extension University and became the president of the Betsy Ross Candy Company. Unfortunate, or what seemed to me at the time to be unfortunate, disagreements with business associates disengaged me from that undertaking. The lure of advertising still was in my blood, and I tried again to give expression to it by organizing a school of advertising and salesmanship as a part of Bryant and Stratton Business College. The enterprise was sailing smoothly, and we were making money rapidly when the United States entered World War I. In response to an inner urge which no words can describe, I walked away from the school and entered the service of the United States government under President Woodrow Wilson's personal direction, leaving a perfectly sound business to disintegrate. On Armistice Day, 1918, I began the publication of the Golden Rule magazine. Despite the fact that I did not have a penny of capital, the magazine grew rapidly and soon gained a nationwide circulation of nearly 500,000, ending its first year's business with a profit of $3,156. Some years later, I learned from an experienced publisher that no man experienced in the publication and distribution of national magazines would think of starting such a magazine with less than $500,000 of capital.
For a proper perspective, $3,156 in 1918 would represent $45,000 today based on the Consumer Price Index average for each year compiled by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, and $202,000 using the nominal GDP per capita tables. Not a bad profit for the first year in a magazine business, when 80 to 90% of new titles fail, and even the successful ones take 3 to 5 years to become profitable.
The Golden Rule magazine and I were destined to part company. The more we succeeded, the more discontented I became, until finally, due to an accumulation of petty annoyances caused by business associates, I made them a present of the magazine and stepped out. Through that move, perhaps, I tossed a small fortune over my shoulder.
This was only the beginning of Hill's love for magazines. The Golden Rule was followed by his publication of the Napoleon Hill magazine. Later in life, he became the editor of Success, a magazine that is still published today.
Next, I organized a training school for salesmen. My first assignment was to train a sales army of 3,000 people for a chain store company, for which I received $10 for each salesman who went through my classes. Within 6 months, my work had netted me a little over $30,000. Success, as far as money was concerned, was crowning my efforts with abundance. Again, I became fidgety inside. I was not happy. It became more obvious every day that no amount of money would ever make me happy. Without the slightest reasonable excuse for my actions, I stepped out and gave up a business from which I might easily have earned a healthy salary. My friends and business associates thought I was crazy, and they were not backward about saying so. Frankly, I was inclined to agree with them, but there seemed nothing I could do about it. I was seeking happiness, and I had not found it. At least that is the only explanation I could offer for my unusual actions. What man really knows himself?
Again, I became fidgety inside. I was not happy. It became more obvious every day that no amount of money would ever make me happy. I could have written this about myself a few years ago. But when I took action by leaving a situation that, although financially rewarding, was no longer aligned with my personal mission, new doors of opportunity opened for me. It turned out to be the best decision of my professional life. Can you think of a time in your life when you made a difficult decision, but knew it was the right one, even when others questioned you?
That was during the late fall of 1923. I found myself stranded in Columbus, Ohio, without funds, and worse still, without a plan by which to work my way out of my difficulty. It was the first time in my life that I had actually been stranded because of lack of funds. Many times previously, I had found money to be rather shy, but never before had I failed to get what I needed for my personal conveniences. The experience stunned me. I seemed totally at sea as to what I could or should do. I thought of a dozen plans by which I might solve my problem, but dismissed them all as being either impractical or impossible of achievement. I felt like one who was lost in a jungle without a compass. Every attempt I made to work my way out brought me back to the original starting point. For nearly 2 months, I suffered with the worst of all human ailments, indecision. I knew the 17 principles of personal achievement, but what I did not know was how to apply them. Without knowing it, I was facing one of those emergencies of life through which, Mr. Carnegie had told me, men sometimes discover their other selves. My distress was so great that it never occurred to me to sit down and analyze its cause and seek its cure.
The worst of all human ailments, indecision. Have you ever felt paralyzed by indecision? This was the first major turning point in Napoleon Hill's life. His moving from job to job, seeking contentment in his own ideal professional life, sounds like many people today, people who are seeking contentment in their jobs and lives. Hill's predicament was, by his own admission, self-inflicted. However, he found himself in very much the same circumstances as someone today who has been negatively affected by the present economic situation. Hill took advantage of his temporary defeat, using it as a spur to force himself into thought and analysis to find his other self. If you have been dealt a blow by economic circumstances, you too can use it as a lever and motivation to find your other self.
Defeat is converted into victory. One afternoon, I reached a decision through which I found the way out of my difficulty. I had a feeling that I wanted to get out into the open spaces of the country, where I could get a breath of fresh air and think. I began to walk, and had gone 7 or 8 miles when I felt myself brought suddenly to a standstill. For several minutes I stood there, as if I had been glued to my tracks. Everything around me went dark. I could hear the loud sound of some form of energy which was vibrating at a very high rate. Then my nerves became quiet, my muscles relaxed, and a great calmness came over me. The atmosphere began to clear, and as it did so, I received a command from within, which came in the form of a thought, as near as I can describe it. The command was so clear and distinct that I could not misunderstand it. In substance, it said, "The time has come for you to complete the philosophy of achievement which you began at Carnegie's suggestion. Go back home at once and begin transferring the data you have gathered from your own mind to written manuscripts." My other self had awakened. For a few minutes I was frightened. The experience was unlike any I had ever undergone before. I turned and walked rapidly until I reached home. As I approached the house, I saw my 3 little boys looking out of a window of our house at our neighbor's children, who were dressing a Christmas tree in the house next door. Then I recalled that it was Christmas Eve. Moreover, I recalled, with a feeling of deep distress, such as I had never known before, that there would be no Christmas tree at our house. The look of disappointment on the faces of my children reminded me painfully of that fact. I went into the house, sat down at my typewriter, and began at once to reduce to writing the discoveries I had made concerning the causes of success and failure. As I placed the first sheet of paper in the typewriter, I was interrupted by that same strange feeling which had come over me out in the country a few hours before, and this thought flashed into my mind. Your mission in life is to complete the world's first philosophy of individual achievement. You have been trying in vain to escape your task, each effort having brought you failure. You are seeking happiness. Learn this lesson once and forever, that you will find happiness only by helping others to find it. You have been a stubborn student. You had to be cured of your stubbornness through disappointment. Within a few years from now, the whole world will start through an experience which will place millions of people in need of the philosophy which you have been directed to complete. Your big opportunity to find happiness by rendering useful service will have come. Go to work, and do not stop until you have completed and published the manuscripts which you have begun. I was conscious of having arrived at last at the end of life's rainbow, and I was happy. Doubt makes its appearance. The spell, if the experience may be called so, passed away. I began to write. Shortly thereafter, my reason suggested to me that I was embarking upon a fool's mission. The idea of a man who was down and almost out, presuming to write a philosophy of personal achievement, seemed so ludicrous that I laughed hilariously, perhaps scornfully. I squirmed in my chair, ran my fingers through my hair, and tried to create an alibi that would justify me, in my own mind, in taking the sheet of paper out of my typewriter before I had really begun to write. But the urge to continue was stronger than the desire to quit. I became reconciled to my task and went ahead.
The urge to continue was stronger than the desire to quit. Remember that time when you wanted to quit, but something drove you to keep going? It may have been your other self.
Looking backward now, in the light of all that has happened, I can see that those minor experiences of adversity through which I had passed were among the most fortunate and profitable of all of my experiences. They were blessings in disguise because they forced me to continue a work which finally brought me an opportunity to make myself more useful to the world than I might have been had I succeeded in any previous plan or purpose. For almost 3 months, I worked on those manuscripts, completing them during the early part of 1924. As soon as they had been completed, I felt myself again being lured by the desire to get back into the great American game of business. Succumbing to the lure, I purchased the Metropolitan Business College in Cleveland, Ohio, and began to lay plans for increasing its capacity. By the end of 1924, we had developed and expanded by adding new courses until we were doing a business nearly double the best previous record the school had ever known. Again, the germ of discontentment began to make itself felt in my blood. Again, I knew that I could not find happiness in that sort of endeavor. I turned the business over to my associates and went on the lecture platform, lecturing on the philosophy of achievement, to the organization of which I had devoted so many of my previous years. One night I was booked to lecture in Canton, Ohio. Fate, or whatever it is that seems to sometimes shape the destiny of men, no matter how hard they may try to battle against it, again stepped into the picture and brought me face to face with a painful experience. In my Canton audience sat Don R. Mellett, publisher of the Canton Daily News. Mr. Mellett became so thoroughly interested in the philosophy of individual achievement on which I lectured that night that he invited me to come to see him the following day. That visit resulted in a partnership agreement which was to have taken place on the 1st of the following January, when Mr. Mellett planned to resign as publisher of the Daily News to take charge of the business and publishing of the philosophy on which I had been working. However, in July 1926, Mr. Mellett was murdered by Pat McDermott, an underworld character, and a Canton, Ohio policeman, both of whom were sentenced to life imprisonment. He was murdered because he was exposing in his newspaper a hookup between the bootleggers and certain members of the Canton police force. The crime was one of the most shocking that the Prohibition era produced.
The July 1926 murder of crusading journalist Donald Ring Mellett, the editor of the Canton, Ohio Daily News, was one of the most publicized crimes in the 1920s. In 1925, Mellett had discovered widespread corruption within the Canton police force and embarked on an anti-vice, anti-corruption editorial campaign, targeting, among others, the Canton police chief. Hill was reported to have asked Ohio's governor to initiate an investigation of the corruption, a detail not reflected in Hill's account. Local underworld figures and at least one Canton police officer hired Patrick McDermott, an ex-con from Pennsylvania, to silence Mellett. Mellett was gunned down outside his home. As the story goes, gunmen were also lying in wait for Hill, but a fortuitous automotive breakdown kept him out of their way. On July 17, the New York Times reported in an article titled "More Death Threats Follow the Slaying of Canton Editor" that the citizens of Canton are terror-stricken by threats of further killings by the rulers of the gamblers, bootleggers, and other criminals. As recounted by Hill, after hearing of Mellett's murder and receiving an anonymous warning to get out of town, he fled to West Virginia. In large part due to the work of a private detective hired by the Stark County prosecutor, McDermott, 2 local gangsters, and a former police detective were ultimately convicted of Mellett's murder.
Chance saves my life. The morning after Mr. Mellett's death, I was called on the telephone and put on notice by some unknown person that I had 1 hour in which to get out of Canton, that I could go voluntarily within the hour, but if I waited longer, I probably would go in a pine box. My business association with Mr. Mellett had apparently been misunderstood. His murderers evidently believed I was directly connected with the exposé he was making in his newspapers. I did not wait for the 1 hour time limit to expire, but immediately got into my automobile and drove down to the home of relatives in the mountains of West Virginia, where I remained until the murderers had been placed in jail. That experience came well within the category described by Mr. Carnegie as an emergency that forces men to think. For the first time in my life, I knew the pain of constant fear. My experience of a few years before, in Columbus, had filled my mind with doubt and temporary indecision, but this one had filled it with a fear which I seemed unable to remove. During the time that I was in hiding, I seldom left the house at night, and when I did step out, I kept my hand on an automatic pistol in my coat pocket, with the safety catch unlatched for immediate action. If a strange automobile stopped in front of the house where I was hiding, I went into the basement and carefully scrutinized its occupants through the basement windows. After some months of this sort of experience, my nerves began to crack. My courage had completely left me. The ambition, which had heartened me during the long years of labor in my search for the causes of failure and success, also had departed. Slowly, step by step, I felt myself slipping into a state of lethargy from which I was afraid I should never be able to emerge. The feeling must have been closely akin to that experienced by one who suddenly steps into quicksand and realizes that every effort to extricate himself carries him just so much deeper. Fear is a self-generating morass. If the seed of insanity had been in my makeup, surely it would have germinated during those months of living death. Foolish indecision, irresolute dreams, doubt, and fear were my mind's concern day and night. The emergency I faced was disastrous in 2 ways. First, the very nature of it kept me in a constant state of indecision and fear. Secondly, the forced concealment kept me in idleness with its attendant heaviness of time, which I naturally devoted to worry. My reasoning faculty had almost been paralyzed. I realized that I had to work myself out of this state of mind. But how? The resourcefulness which had helped me to meet all previous emergencies seemed to have completely taken wing, leaving me helpless. Out of my difficulties, which were burdensome enough up to this point, grew another, which seemed more painful than all the others combined. It was the realization that I had spent the better portion of my past years in chasing a rainbow, searching hither and yon for the causes of success, and finding myself now more helpless than any of the 25,000 people whom I had judged as being failures. This thought was almost maddening, Moreover, it was extremely humiliating because I had been lecturing all over the country, in schools and colleges and before business organizations, presuming to tell other people how to apply the 17 principles of success, while here I was, unable to apply them myself. I was sure that I never could again face the world with a feeling of confidence. Every time I looked at myself in a mirror, I noticed an expression of self-contempt on my face, and, not infrequently, I did say things to the man in the mirror which are not printable. I had begun to place myself in the category of charlatans who offer others a remedy for failure which they themselves cannot successfully apply. The criminals who had murdered Mr. Mellett had been tried and sent to the penitentiary for life. Therefore, it was perfectly safe, as far as they were concerned, for me to come out of hiding and again take up my work. I could not come out, however, because now I faced circumstances more frightful than the criminals who had sent me into hiding. The experience had destroyed whatever initiative I had possessed. I felt myself in the clutches of some depressing influence which seemed like a nightmare. I was alive, I could move around, but I could not think of a single move by which I might continue to seek the goal which I had, at Mr. Carnegie's suggestion, set for myself. I was rapidly becoming indifferent, not only toward myself, but worse still, I was becoming grouchy and irritable toward those who had given me shelter during my emergency. I faced the greatest emergency of my life. Unless you have gone through a similar experience, you cannot possibly know how I felt. Such experiences cannot be described. To be understood, they must be felt.
My reasoning faculty had almost been paralyzed. Hill was paralyzed first by fear of physical harm, and then by the shame of having been paralyzed by that fear. Have you ever been paralyzed by similar emotions? When you are faced with your own emergency, fear can either motivate you or paralyze you. By recognizing that you have a choice and reacting positively to your fears, you can permanently change your life for the better. Many people today may be experiencing the same feelings of anger, followed by irritability and the debilitating feeling of indifference. They feel discouraged and lack self-confidence due to uncertainty in their financial situation or personal lives. They may be angry and allow that anger to paralyze them. I had a conversation with just such a young man. "I am 30 years old," he said, "and have no marketable skills or prospects." He had a million excuses for not taking action to change his situation. I pointed out that unless he took action, nothing would change. "Unless you make an effort to change things," I said, "in a year's time, the only difference will be that you are 31 years old with no marketable skills or prospects." Does this pattern sound familiar to you, either for yourself or someone you care for? How do you break that paralysis? Napoleon Hill now shares how he overcame his fear and indifference and found the hope, inspiration, and motivation to recover and create success in his life.
The most dramatic moment of my life. The turn came suddenly, in fall 1927, more than a year after the Canton incident. I left the house one night and walked up to the public school building on top of a hill above the town. I had reached a decision to fight the matter out with myself before that night ended. I began to walk around the building, trying to force my befuddled brain to think clearly. I must have made several hundred trips around the building before anything which even remotely resembled organized thought began to take place in my mind. As I walked, I repeated over and over to myself, "There is a way out, and I'm going to find it before I go back to the house." I must have repeated that sentence 1,000 times. Moreover, I meant exactly what I was saying. I was thoroughly disgusted with myself, but I entertained a hope of salvation. Then, like a flash of lightning out of a clear sky, an idea burst into my mind with such force that the impulse drove my blood up and down my veins. This is your testing time. You have been reduced to poverty and humiliated in order that you might be forced to discover your other self.
If today's economic times have dealt you a blow, moving you toward poverty, embarrassing you, or damaging your self-confidence, consider it a test, just as Napoleon Hill did in the late 1920s and early 1930s. Force yourself to discover your other self. By working through the low points in your life and persevering, You can often gain the insight needed to truly succeed.
For the first time in years, I recalled what Mr. Carnegie had said about this other self. I recalled now that he said I would discover it toward the end of my labor of research into the causes of failure and success, and that the discovery usually came as the result of an emergency, when men are forced to change their habits and to think their way out of difficulty. I continued to walk around the schoolhouse, but now I was walking on air. Subconsciously, I seemed to know that I was about to be released from the self-made prison into which I had cast myself. I realized that this great emergency had brought me an opportunity, not merely to discover my other self, but to test the soundness of the philosophy of achievement which I had been teaching others as being workable. Soon I would know whether it would work or not. I made up my mind that if it did not work, I would burn the manuscripts I had written and never again be guilty of telling other people that they were the masters of their fate, the captains of their souls.
Hill is paraphrasing from the poem Invictus, published in 1888 by William Ernest Henley, 1849 to 1903.
Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how strait the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. The full moon was just rising over the mountaintop. I had never seen it shine so brightly before. As I stood gazing at it, another thought flashed into my mind. It was this: you have been telling other people how to master fear and how to surmount the difficulties which arise out of the emergencies of life. From now on you can speak with authority, because you are about to rise above your own difficulties with courage and purpose, resolute and unafraid. With that thought came a change in the chemistry of my being, which lifted me into a state of exultation I had never before known. My brain began to clear itself of the state of lethargy into which it had lapsed. My faculty of reason began to work once more. For a brief moment, I was happy to have had the privilege of going through those long months of torment, because the experience provided an opportunity for me to test the soundness of the principles of achievement which I had so laboriously wrested from my research. When this thought came to me, I stopped still, drew my feet closely together, saluted, I did not know what or whom, and stood rigidly at attention for several minutes. This seemed at first like a foolish thing to do, but while I was standing there, another thought came through in the form of an order that was as brief and snappy as any ever given by a military commander to a subordinate. The order said, "Tomorrow get into your automobile and drive to Philadelphia, where you will receive aid in publishing your philosophy of achievement." There was no further explanation and no modification of the order. As soon as I received it, I walked back to the house, went to bed, and slept with peace of mind such as I had not known for over a year. When I awoke the following morning, I got out of bed and immediately began to pack my clothes and to make ready for the trip to Philadelphia. My reason told me that I was embarking upon a fool's mission. Who did I know in Philadelphia to whom I might apply for financial aid in publishing 8 volumes of books at a cost of $25,000? I asked myself. Instantly, the answer to that question flashed into my mind, as plainly as if it had been uttered in audible words. You are following orders now, instead of asking questions. Your other self will be in charge during this trip. There was another condition which seemed to make my preparation to go to Philadelphia absurd. I had no money. This thought had barely occurred to me when my other self exploded it by giving another sharp order, saying, "Ask your brother-in-law for $50, and he will lend it to you." The order seemed definite and final. Without further hesitation, I followed instructions. When I asked my brother-in-law for the money, he said, "Why, certainly you can have $50, but if you are going to be gone very long, you had better take $100. I thanked him and said I thought $50 would be enough. I knew it was not enough, but that was the amount my other self had commanded me to ask for, and that is the amount I secured. I was greatly relieved when I found that my brother-in-law was not going to ask me why I was going to Philadelphia. If he had known all that had taken place in my mind during the previous night, he perhaps would have thought I should go to a psychiatric hospital for treatment instead of going to Philadelphia on a wild goose chase. My other self takes command. I left with my head telling me I was a fool, and my other self commanding me to ignore the challenge and carry out my instructions. I drove all night, arriving in Philadelphia early the next morning. My first thought was to look up a modestly priced boarding house where I could rent a room for about $1 a day. Here again, my other self took charge and gave the command to register at the most exclusive hotel in the city. With a little more than $40 of my remaining capital in my pocket, it seemed like financial suicide when I marched up to the desk and asked for a room, or rather, I should say, I started to ask for a room when my newly discovered other self gave the order to ask for a suite of rooms, the cost of which would about consume my remaining capital in 2 days. I obeyed. The bellboy picked up my bags, handed me my claim check for my automobile, and bowed me toward the elevator, as if I were the Prince of Wales. It was the first time in more than a year that any human being had shown me such deference. My own relatives, with whom I had been living, far from having shown me deference, had, so I imagined, felt I was a burden on their hands. And I am sure that I was, because no man in the frame of mind that I had been in for the past year could be anything other than a burden to all with whom he came into contact. It was becoming apparent that my other self was determined to wean me away from the inferiority complex which I had developed. I tossed the bellboy $1. I started to estimate what my hotel bill would be by the end of the week when my other self commanded me to get my mind entirely off of all thoughts of limitation and to conduct myself, for the time being, just as I would if I had all the money I wanted in my pockets. The experience I was passing through was both new and strange to me. I had never posed as being anything other than what I believed myself to be. For nearly half an hour, this other self gave orders which I followed to the letter during the subsequent period of my stay in Philadelphia. The instructions were given through the medium of thoughts which presented themselves in my mind with such force that they were readily distinguishable from my ordinary self-created thoughts.
Hill took on the persona of the wealthy man he wanted to be. We strongly agree that to be wealthy, you need to think wealthy. It is also important to be in the right environment. Don Green, CEO of the Napoleon Hill Foundation, once told me, "I first bought my good suits from Sobel's, a custom clothing store, where Eastman Kodak executives shopped. The owner had a sign behind the register that said, 'If you want to be a success, you must first dress the part.' However, we recommend moderation in trying to emulate Mr. Hill in spending money that he did not have."
I received strange orders from a strange source. My instructions began in this fashion. You are now completely in charge of your other self. You are entitled to know that 2 entities occupy your body, as in fact 2 similar entities occupy the body of each living person on earth. One of these entities is motivated by and responds to the impulse of fear. The other is motivated by and responds to the impulse of faith. For more than a year, you have been driven, like a slave, by the fear entity. Night before last, the faith entity gained control over your physical body, and you are now motivated by that entity. For the sake of convenience, you may call this faith entity your other self. It knows no limitations, has no fears, and recognizes no such word as impossible. You are directed to select this environment of luxury in a good hotel as a means of discouraging the return to power of the fear entity. That fear-motivated old self is not dead. It has merely been dethroned. And it will follow you around wherever you go, awaiting a favorable opportunity to step in and take charge of you again. It can gain control of you only through your thoughts. Remember this, and keep the doors to your mind tightly closed against all thoughts which seek to limit you in any manner whatsoever, and you will be safe. Do not permit yourself to worry about the money you will need for your immediate expenses. That will come to you by the time you must have it. Now, let us get down to business. First of all, you should know that the faith entity now in charge of your body performs no miracles, nor does it work in opposition to any of nature's laws. As long as it is in charge of your body, it will guide you when you call on it, through impulses of thought which it will place in your mind in carrying out your plans through the most logical and convenient natural media available. Above everything else, get this fact clearly fixed in your mind, that your other self will not do your work for you. It will only guide you intelligently in achieving for yourself the objects of your desires.
Will you be guided by faith, or will you allow fear to overtake you?
This other self will aid you in translating your plans into reality. Moreover, you should know that it begins always with your major or most pronounced desire. At this time, your major desire, the one which brought you here, is to publish and distribute the results of your research into the causes of success and failure. You estimate that you will need approximately $25,000. Among your acquaintances, there is a man who will supply you with this needed capital. Begin at once to call into your mind the names of all persons of your acquaintance whom you have reason to believe might be induced to furnish the financial aid you require. When the name of the logical person comes into your mind, you will recognize it immediately. Communicate with that person, and the aid you seek will be given. In your approach, however, present your request in terminology such as you would use in the usual course of business transactions. Make no reference whatsoever to this introduction you have had to your other self. If you violate these instructions, you will meet with temporary defeat. Your other self will remain in charge and continue to direct you as long as you rely upon it. Keep doubt and fear and worry and all thoughts of limitation entirely out of your mind. That will be all for the present. You will now begin to move of your own free will, precisely as you did before you discovered your other self. Physically, you are the same as you have always been. Therefore, no one will recognize that any change has taken place in you. I looked around the room, blinked my eyes, and to make sure that I was not dreaming, I got up and walked over to a mirror and looked at myself closely. The expression on my face had changed from one of doubt to one of courage and faith. There was no longer any doubt in my mind that my physical body was in charge of an influence far different from the one which had been dethroned 2 nights before as I walked around that schoolhouse in West Virginia.
Here, in editing the manuscript, I have ended the chapter at one of the great turning points in the author's life. Have you ever undergone a life change such as the one Hill just described? It can also be described in religious terms as a conversion experience. Others may simply refer to it as a wake-up call, or a tap on the shoulder, or more vehemently as a slap in the face.
Okay, that's
Chapter 2.
That's the
A
end.
New World.
Yep. Okay. All right. So that was kind of a long section there, but it was filled with a lot of epiphanies, a lot of guidance, ideas, thoughts, slaps in the face, if you will. So the questions that I would ask you at the end of the chapter, let me just pull those back up again here. What is your most impactful takeaway from this chapter? What hit you as the most motivating, the most frightening, the emotion that hit you? That's first question. What did you learn from this chapter? If you were taking notes, or if you had to pick the one thing that you learned that would be of value to you, what would that be? What ideas, popped up? Did they come in a burst? Did they come one at a time? Did one idea lead to another? Do you see yourself anywhere in this journey? I think just about everybody could have some empathy with what Hill went through and look at it and say, I've been there in one form or another. And finally, with all that said, who will be the benefactors of what you learned today? If you were to take that most impactful thing that hit you, the ideas that popped into your mind, sparked the creativity and other thoughts, how would you assemble those in a way that would help somebody, and who would those people be? So that's kind of the end of the chapter takeaways. Now, I just want to run back up real quickly to these questions that we started with. Um, so getting into the discussion now, and I know we've run a little long here, but this is kind of where the fun starts.
Yeah.
Was Napoleon Hill guided from the onset of his journey, or did his journey attract guidance? Anybody have a thought on that?
Yeah, I do. First of all, Dana, thank you very much for not only being a part of this, but thank you so much for guiding us through this. One of the things as I was listening is not only did I find myself in a number of situations, I think if we really look at ourselves like Steve Jobs says, we always can connect the dots looking backwards. It's just, oh, I see what I was going through. And now I see why this happened, and this happened. And even though, for some people like Napoleon Hill, having someone that you thought was going to chase you down and kill you, I think that a lot of people, while you're going through the craziness of life at the moment that you're doing it, it seems like the most important thing in the world to you. You know what I mean? It's like you don't have the answers, you don't know where to look for help, you don't know how to solve the problem. You sometimes feel like you're alone and there's no one there to help you. Another thing that's extremely discouraging is that you don't think anybody cares. It's like no one really cares to help me get through this situation, and that's what makes you be quiet enough to lean on that other part of you. You know what I mean? Napoleon Hill said, the onset of his journey, what that was, for me, when I realized that my mind can't get me out of the situation that I'm in, that outer self for me is just asking a higher power. You know what I mean? It's I know that I was created by a creator, and usually what I try to do is I try to solve all problems by myself. And it's not until you humble yourself and get rid of your ego, edging God out, that you surrender and you ask outward for help, for guidance. And when you do that because you have no other source, that's when I've gotten, epiphanies, or like you said, aha moments, or, wow, it's like I then realize how long I've been trying to run the show, and that I hadn't taken that step to step away and go, listen, I need help here. I need guidance here. So that's where I got it. It's just that, we have a tendency of always trying, like the story talked about when he was going through the dark stuff of his life, and then even in his previous stories of him repeating a pattern where even though he looked at the world, looked at it, and he looked at it as, wow, people should be really happy with this amount of success, but I could care less. I'd rather give it to somebody else because this is not this is not what I'm looking for. So everybody else is like, wow, you made 3,000 or 20,000 or 46,000. And it's like, this ain't doing it for me. And you notice that he always walked away and just basically gave it to whoever was helping him because it wasn't doing it for him, because he was looking at the source of achievement through himself, instead of him trying to think, wow, that I'm doing this because someone said I needed to make a bunch of money, so now I did it, and this is not fulfilling in any way, shape, or form. It wasn't, in his mind, it wasn't doing anything for other people, so he would just rather walk away from it. And so yeah, that's what I got out of it.
Yeah, it's pretty insightful, Robert. Yeah, you're one of the few who have the total expertise of having gone through some serious trials to make that statement.
Yeah, it's so yeah, I recognize myself numerous times in that story. As is you know Yeah, it's funny. You think that you would give up right away and surrender, but we don't. We don't. We just keep denying and telling ourselves the thing that I actually said today in the art of fulfillment when we were talking in the daily wisdom was on this same track. It's like each and every day whether or not you're imagining a better future for yourself and the people you love, the moment that you're actually in action. Like Napoleon Hill said, he looked in the mirror and he seen a different person. It was someone that was like, hey, I got this. I know where we're going. I'm okay now.
Yeah.
I think a lot of
One,
people right now might look in the mirror and see the same person that's been holding them back for a while.
yeah, really. Want to turn around and slap him. Well, one of the things I noticed in his repetitive behavior of starting businesses and tossing them over his shoulder was the absence of greed.
Mm-hmm.
He was seeking something. He was seeking a journey, a result, an outcome. He was seeking happiness, but he kept finding that it wasn't making him happy. So he just left. No
Yeah.
greed, no remorse. He just moved on. And I found that rather interesting. That I don't know how many people you know that won't give up for fear of greed. They get a little more out of it. I can get just a little more out of it. He said, "Nope, you've had enough. I'm on my way."
Yeah, it's I've been there numbers of times myself where you believe by hitting a rank or hitting a certain level of achievement or income that it's going to be all that and a bag of chips. It's going to be incredible. And then once you get those accolades or whatever, hit that goal, it's like that this ain't what I'm looking for.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Does anybody else have an insight that they want to share? Well, I'll offer one more here on that first question. I think what Napoleon Hill did, it was a combination of things. I think because of who he was and who his um, other self was that he had yet to meet. But his
Right.
purpose, I think his purpose attracted the attention of the other self, who was just kind of following him around to see if he was really worth paying any attention to. And when he demonstrated the lack of greed, when he demonstrated the stick-to-itiveness to keep following a purpose, he was demonstrating faith, whether he knew it or not.
Yeah.
And then one day he found himself in the ditch, out of control, out of money. And that's when the other self said, okay, I've checked off the boxes here, and you meet the criteria for me to show up and help you. So in the answer to that question, what he did is he actually created through his journey the attraction of that guidance. And I think all of us can learn from that. We always hear live with gratitude, uh, you know, keep your thoughts positive, do good or don't do it all. There's several philosophies there, and there's biblical prophecies that all surround the teachings that lead up to a certain occurrence and an outcome. And that is really evident in that part of the book. When I went through and understood what this guy had gone through, and I'm assuming he's perfectly truthful in what he wrote down, he basically attracted the guidance, and anybody can do that. Now,
Yeah.
the other thing, let me see if I even wrote that question down here. Yeah, let's see. Well, the idea that I was going to there is that it's subtle. He he got brought to a standstill. He saluted like he said he didn't know why or who.
Yeah.
That was kind of a sudden hit the brakes and pay attention thing. Most of the time, that's not what happens. As he gets into it further, you'll hear these little insights where you had to listen, and you're not listening for the booming voice from the sky. You're listening
Right.
for that tiny little feeling. You're listening for that thought that pops into your mind that if you're aware enough to say, where did that come from?
It's a whisper.
It's
It's
a
a
whisper.
whisper. Yeah, it's a whisper. It's a tap on a shoulder.
Yeah,
But I find in life sometimes the noise, the noise and the busyness and just doing what you know how to do stops you from hearing that. It's like you get so
Mhm.
much noise and so much worry and so many voices in your head that what you do is you even, like I've said many times, I noticed too that in the story that we just listened to, and I've had this happen to me. Um, because of the lack of believing in yourself, what you do is you constantly seek out partners. So you don't believe in your ability to do it on your own. So what you do is you consistently find people to help you, and you form these partnership, and they're not equally yoked. You don't know what it is at the time, but what you did is you brought all the energy, you brought all the excitement, you brought all the imagination, and maybe another person did nothing but just bring the finances. You know what I mean? And you felt like you needed their help. You needed somebody's name or somebody. And so when all of a sudden you do that partnership, he might not have realized that what it was. But when all of a sudden he created what he created, I can guarantee you one of the thoughts that he may have had is, wow, I did all this. And now I surrounded myself by a group of people that just wants me to continue to be the performer, the producer. You know what I mean? And it's like, now if you guys think you can do it all, here it is.
Yep.
You go do it. It's like if it's so damn easy, you know, here you go. I'll just give it all to you. I'll go find something else to do.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, that's a good insight. And the next question down there that I asked was, were
And
his
please,
business?
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
Yeah.
everyone that's on here, if you haven't been on a master's mind before, that means more than two.
Yeah, chime right on in, just
Yeah, it's like you might not think that your insights are important. You might not think your point of view is, but I promise you, that's will stir up thoughts and perspectives from other people going, wow. And even if you feel like it's not important, you interacting with a master's mind is really going to take you to the next step as well. So sorry, Dana.
oh, no problem. I just saw Melody's comment pop up where, Dino doesn't necessarily instill faith. I mean, you got to, you know, Dino is talking to you, so pay attention.
Yeah.
But, the next question down I asked was, were his business endeavors distractions or preparation? I think you answered the question. Those were preparation. They
Yeah.
weren't distractions.
And
He didn't
sometimes we
know it.
think and sometimes we think they're distractions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess another way to look at that is in our lives, the distractions you have every day, ask yourself a question, is this preparing me for something? And
Very
that'll
good.
tell you whether or not it's a distraction you need to abandon or continue, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. The next question, can descending into the depths of desperation and despair reveal a wellspring of fortune? And I think he confirmed that. And later in the book, it'll come forth in yet more confirmations. It's that moment when you've run out of everything in money, fuel, a home, food, confidence, that you just sit down and say, okay, I'm at the rock bottom. So it's time to put away the shovel and
Yeah.
move, you know. Uh, yeah,
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 it'd be really interesting if people, when when all of a sudden the decisions that you made, I've looked at this a little different in my life too, where all of a sudden it seems like something changes, and it would be easier for me to go get a job, but there I've been in places where all of a sudden, 1 month I'm doing extremely well, and because of things out of my control, the next thing I know that I don't have a car, I don't have a home, I don't have income. You know what I mean? And I really related that with him. It's like all of a sudden it's like we'll give you an hour to leave. You know what I mean? And we have no idea during this story if he was married or had kids or a girlfriend if he was single. And it was just like, okay, I got to walk away from everything. You know what I mean? And I love the way he said that he felt like he was a burden to his family. You know what I mean? So even though his brother was willing to give him $100, it was like, wow, we're so happy to see you leave.
Yeah, really. Oh,
Because it sounded like he was one of those people that we sometimes see where, uh, every day if you're just a negative, you're negative and you don't see any way out, and that can be quite a burden on the people that you're living with for sure.
yeah, that was a low spot in his life, that was for sure.
Yeah.
And the next question, what causes success? That has a lot of answers in this book, but the one that he wrote right up front was the cause of success is a force which might be properly called the other self. So he comes back to that again, but it's what he was saying there is what propels you to success is all the things that you do to attract the energy that propels you forward. So that's positive thoughts, that's faith, that's belief. You're in charge of that, but you're being guided. And unless you understand and appreciate that is a cause of success, you could find yourself going in circles.
Yep.
It's simple stuff, but it requires so much conscious effort to keep your thoughts aligned. And the cause of failure is the exact opposite. It's when you have embraced negativity, fear, that's a cause of failure
Yep.
because you now let go of the tether that was pulling you forward. So yeah, that was an interesting insight, very simply put, but yeah. Okay, the other
I
self that
like
Hill
what Faith
encountered,
says here.
ultimately, it's
Oh,
faith.
I'm
Oh,
sorry.
go ahead.
I like what Faith says here. How you look at your situation is how you create success.
yeah, that would definitely come from that would definitely for me would be coming from a place of gratitude. You know, it's like you can reshape your whole attitude by just being grateful. Like in the just looking at yourself as a miracle and being grateful for everything. You can change that for sure. That's a great point, Faith.
Yeah. Well, let's see. I think we're about to the end of the questions. Yeah. Yeah.
Anyone else have something they'd like to share that they feel like they got out of it?
I'm
Terry?
gonna just really quickly. I'm gonna add that I like this idea of the other self and the fact that the other self is faith, and it just is. You think that there's nothing else other than you and the way that you think and the way that you feel right now. But if you're looking at it from this point of view, where there's the faith and fear, and we live in fear, that is being human as it is as of this moment. But if we take the step and we go by way of faith and we live in that way, that is considered, according to Napoleon Hill in this book, the other self. And that's the way that we need to start looking.
Hmm. Yeah. And I would also mention that I read an article here a while ago. I'll have to pull that up again and see if I can share it. But it was written by somebody who was writing on millennials and Gen Zers and their current state of mind, which is helplessness. Basically, they see no future. They're afraid of dying, not having mattered. And part of what's fueling that is the constant immersion in a world of fear, doubt, uncertainty, hate, division. I mean, if you look at it, I mean, geez, you kind of hate to go to a Downersville here, but the reality is we have become so numb to the information that's being poured on society that sometimes we don't stop to think that what people are looking for is what we're discussing here.
Yeah.
How can I have faith in an outcome? What do I need to do? And it's not difficult. It just requires being aware and then getting up every day and once again taking note that this is what I must do. And Hill's going to unload a whole bunch more stuff on us. But yeah, we have a world and a society right now that is just absolutely in need of this kind of help. And it begins with us.
Yeah. That the whole concept, I think that if you would have said, I loved how you started this out. I love how you started this out where you were saying, you got to have a little bit of open-mindedness, because I think that if you went to a lot of people and you say, well, what does your other self say about this situation? They immediately would be going, what are you talking about? What are you talking about, other self?
I see that Mary Valchik has her hand raised. Or is that an agreement, or do you want to share also, Mary? Share? Yes. Okay.
Awesome.
Let's go ahead and open you up, and please share, Mary. Thank you.
Just quickly, I think sometimes that we, as our environment and everything we do day to day, I think we get so engrossed in doing everything day to day that we don't take time to hear our other self. And if we do hear it, we just ignore it because we're like, it's just noise, extra noise, and we don't even think to acknowledge it. That's just my thought.
Totally.
That was all.
No, that was perfect. I would say that a majority of the people, I don't know, I'm just saying this, I don't know the statistics. I would say a majority of the people that you would share something like this with would just not be open and minded enough to think that there is another self, right? And for the people that do understand there could possibly be an other self, it was like, when are they going to show up and take the show over? The one thing I loved about, a lot of people, there might be a tap on their shoulder, a whisper in their ear, or sometimes, like I say, I even ask for a physical surrender. A lot of people might think that's silly, but I go, listen, if I'm not paying attention and you gave me free will, I need you to physically stop me in my tracks so that I'm aware that I'm doing the wrong things and not doing the right things. And I don't think that anybody is even aware that you can ask for that. I ask for a stopping of my language, the interrupting of my language, the interrupting of my thoughts. It's like stop everything that I'm doing so I'm aware, so I can pay attention, to listening to the right voices.
I love that.
Yeah. So if you are quiet and you do ask to hear that voice and you're quiet, you'll hear it.
Yep. I love that, Robert.
Yeah.
You are so true. Maybe we need to ask and, slap me upside the head, stop me somehow, because I think we're probably given the opportunity to hear our other selves. We are just like, whatever, and just going about our day. So yes,
yeah, Mary, I would
that.
say, not disagreeing with you. It's just we really don't have a clue how much we're running on autopilot.
Exactly. You are right.
We have no clue how much we're on autopilot, where even the thoughts before we do the habits, you know what I mean? It's just this constant thing. And I know this is totally off track, but a lot of you may have heard that a really well-known NASCAR driver and his family died in an airplane crash, right? And it was just really, really super sad because he was such an incredible person. And his family was too. He was just like, and for this to happen, there's a lot of people that are like, they 1000% believe that the pilot that was flying the plane, which he was also flying it, that both of them at the same time went through a panic thinking that made them all die. And it was just a total panic thinking that when an engine went out, now you don't have enough thrust to propel the plane. So they immediately called emergency to come back for a landing, and they could see the runway in sight. Then their habits took over, and they let the gear down, and they also let down the flaps. And the one engine didn't have enough power to get it to the runway. So in a emergency situation like that, they shouldn't have dropped the flaps. But that's what you do when you land. If every damn time you land, you pulled the flaps, can you see where now in an emergency situation, they did something that they've always done that they shouldn't have done?
Wow.
And it's like so sad. And right behind that, we probably not even a week later, I don't know if you guys heard about this, but they still don't know what happened to the plane. But the plane lost all oxygen. And it was a jet similar to the one that just killed that family. And it lost oxygen. Both pilot and the co-pilot became unconscious. It happened that fast. And the plane came on and went, are you guys there? Immediately called the tower, said the pilot and the co-pilot are not interacting, did a distress, and landed the plane all by itself.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm going like, I got chills. So this is a new auto pilot that lands the plane when it realizes that humans are not doing the right thing. And I'm going like, how many people are ordering that? So you have this incredible, well-known family that all die because of a mistake by a human being, which is very, very true all the time. And then you had this other self. How many people would like the other self when you're not available? It's like, I'll do the SOS, I'll call the tower, I'll get clearance, and I'll land the plane. And it's like the plane landed, all the emergency people showed up, pilot and the co-pilot and the people in the cabin woke up, didn't have a clue what the hell happened.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm going like, people that got money, I can guarantee you that will be added to the plane no matter how much experience the pilot and the co-pilot have. You know what I mean? And so that's what made me think of that other self, that, while we're panicking and we're doing the same shit that we always do, just making the situation worse and panicking, it would need to have the other self go, can you listen? Can you listen? I got it from here. So I hope that analogy helped you guys.
Mary, thank you so much. Great contribution. Lisa Marie, I see your hand is up. Would you like to contribute as well? All right.
Yeah, just one quick thing. This is amazing. Thank you so much, Dana and Robert and Craig, for all you guys are doing. When we were reading through the chapter, that other self just freaking nailed me a couple of times. And the whole freaking time I was thinking, and maybe I wasn't thinking along the right lines as far as the story goes, but this is where it brought my mind to, is Melody gifting me her gold ticket to Houston, right? And I'm thinking I'm coming up with every freaking reason why I can't go. I can't afford the ticket. I can't. Okay, I got to do a shuttle here. I got to do shuttle. Oh my God, I got to do this and I got to do that. And I'm thinking when he was reading that chapter, I thought, how the hell can I I just keep sabotaging myself and
Yeah,
thinking that what? I shouldn't care what the hell it costs. I need to frickin' go. I need to go to be Melody's eyes and ears. You know what I mean?
I do. I do. And
So it,
how I distinguish the other self from the normal self, or should I say the abnormal self, is the answers that you get and how you feel with the answers. So if you notice in the writing that we just heard, when Napoleon Hill was listening to the right self, uh, it made him feel good. It put him in situations like the perfect example that you said, Lisa. Well, what I'll do is I'll find a place, that's so shabby that's $1. It costs $1 a night to stay. I can guarantee you he wouldn't have got the same experience if he wouldn't have listened to the other self. See what I mean? The other self's
that
like, no,
yourself
no,
telling me.
you're not only going to the hotel, but you're getting a suite. And because you did, the bellboy is going to treat you different with the baggage. And when you check in the room, you're going to feel different about yourself. And I love how the lady had to come on and go, uh, just understand that we're not telling you to spend money you don't have. I thought,
Right,
so that was
right.
illegal. That was the legal part of the company that was stepping in there going like, well, I listened to Outwitting the Devil, and I was told that I need to spend a lot of money to go on this trip.
You know what? I just thought during God, I was listening so in depth, and I thought I just kept thinking you need to freaking go. You know what? We can afford it. Damn
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
I can
And
I can
I
afford to go.
agree. I agree, just like everything. If he wouldn't have borrowed the $50, he wouldn't have drove to Philadelphia. He wouldn't have checked into that hotel. Then the
Exactly.
rest of the stuff is not happening. I know we're going to listen to the
Exactly.
rest, but it's like I can't tell you how many times that Terry and I have had discussions, and what we were doing the next step had 0 sense to it. 0 sense. And that's when, it's like I talked about earlier today. It's like, Matt and Hannah wanted to find a place in California, and real estate was so crazy during that time. And I said, well, I just asked myself, what would get us this place when Matt and Hannah went there? And this was at the time in California where there was like 20 and 30 people showing up for each place, you know? And so I call my real estate guy and say, tell him I'll pay for the lease in advance for a year up front. And he went, that'll do it.
You know what?
It is
I decided listening to that, you know what? My family may not be behind me, whatever. They don't need to be. I can do
no,
this on my fucking own. I
yeah,
can. And God damn, I'm going. So I don't care what it takes. I'm freaking going. So
I'm glad. I'm glad.
there, there you have it. So I just wanted to say, so thank you, Dana.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, one of the concepts that both of you have talked about, and it's going to get hit in many ways in the coming chapters, is called hypnotic rhythm. And basically, what that is, it's the habits of life that lead you in a certain path. And a hypnotic rhythm can be negative or positive. So keep that in mind when we get to it, and I think it'll resonate big time with what our friend the devil is going to share.
Good. Anything else you want to cover, or anybody else? See, a lot of people are going, it's supper time. I gotta get going.
Well, that's all I have, and then next time we'll finish the that particular chapter, chapter 1. So the next session of us together will complete the book's chapter 1. So that will be chapter 1B for us, and then we're off to chapter 2 in the book.
Let's everybody give Dana a hand, not only for his time, but
Thank
you
you.
know,
Thank you.
I know he's gone through this multiple times, and I love his preparation for it, and also his guidance and his instructions. I really appreciate you, Dana.
Well, thank you, Robert. Appreciate you as well. Appreciate the community. So thank you one and all for being here. And, you're going to have it posted, so you'll be able to go back and read those questions and ponder them further.
Thank you very much. Craig,
All right.
close us
Well, thank
out.
you.
Thank you, Dana.
Thank you all
Yep.
so very much. What a great session. Dana, I can't wait as we continue on this journey of outwitting the devil. And we appreciate your insight, your guidance, and you. So bless you. Thank you so very much. Robert, Terry, thank you again. I got to give shout outs also to Mary Valchek and Lisa Marie Cook for participating in a little bit of a discussion. And there is more every week, every Wednesday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, of Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill with our special guest, Dana Scranton, and you. So we'll look forward to seeing you next time right here on Outwitting the Devil. Don't forget, on Unlimited Wisdom, we have Every Day Alive going on. Please check the calendar in Unlimited Wisdom and you can find out what it is. We got a lot of different things going on. For example, tomorrow is the premium tiers breakthroughs. And then on Friday, as well as Tuesday and Wednesday, Friday as well as Tuesday and Wednesday, that's it. Daily Wisdom. We had one earlier today at noon Pacific, 3 Eastern, and so much more. So without further ado, let's go ahead and wrap up this. Thank you all so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. There'll be a few things in the notes as we posted in the classroom for you to look at. Until next time, please be good to yourselves. Be cash. Bye-bye. I'm going to go ahead and open it up so that we can all say so long and have a great day.
Bye, Ezra. Bye, Matt.
See y'all.
Thank you, everybody. Love you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you. This is
Bill, Lisa
awesome.
Marie.
Great job, Dana.
Love you
Thank
guys.
Thank you,
Appreciate you.
Robert, Terry,
Melody,
Melody,
Angela, Eric, Faith, Dustin, Michael, Bill, Melody, Bueller.
Bueller.